Hello, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm finally wrapping up Nonfiction November, and it was a very exciting kind of challenge to participate in this year for the first time. As you may have seen in my November wrap-up video, which I talked about the 16 books that I did read throughout the month. 8 of them were nonfiction, so 50%, which I was very pleased with, and there was many reasons why. It was maybe a bit lower than I expected, but generally really pleased with my month of reading. I will only be talking about 7 of those books today because one of them, which was We Should Hang Out Sometime by Josh Sundquist, I read for a buddy read with Jay from My Quarter Life Crisis, so I will be talking about that in an upcoming video. But 7 books to talk about today, so let's dive right in. Let's start with Bonnie Tsui. So I listened to the essay The Uncertain Sea that she wrote. I think she wrote during the pandemic, either late 2020 or early 2021, I'm not sure. But it was definitely kind of talking about what we're currently living through. It's only an hour, 10 or 15 minutes. So when I went on a run one Sunday morning, I decided to just listen to it as I went. And it just felt nice to accomplish a book while running, So it was really good. It gave me the taste to read her full book, Why We Swim. So there are very similar themes in both. In The Uncertain Sea, which is so funny because I feel like, and I don't know if it was deliberate, but I feel like she also named it that because of uncertainty. And obviously what we're living through is obviously an uncertain time, often not clear where things are going, and swimming in the depth of the sea sometimes feels like that as well. And she just talks about, I think it's mainly one person's experience that she talks about, which is I think he filmed videos in the sea. He was a diver and also was diving for seafood on the west coast of the US, and how he got attacked basically by a shark one day, and what got him to go back. And it was really beautiful, really well done, and it just feels like it does fit with Why We Swim, which I also really enjoy, and I really recommend. I'm one of these people that really likes swimming, especially in pools and stuff like that. I really like swimming in the sea. However, I am one of those people who is afraid of what she cannot see and the depth of the sea. Just you go in and then you put your head under and it's just dark. Oh, that freaks me out. And I did have, like, the first time I did wild swimming in Scotland for a triathlon, I actually had a bit of a panic attack when we went in, because I was just like, oh my god, I don't know what's under there. And every time something touched my foot, I was just like, oh my god. But it's still something I really enjoy, and something I want to do more of, and I can't wait to go back to the pool one day, hopefully in 2022. So it's just a great book if you love swimming, or if that intrigues you, because I know lots of people maybe don't love going to swimming in the sea, but it's still something that they appreciate. It's just something that they're not totally comfortable with. And yeah, and there's so many different stories, like fishermen who've survived, boat capsizing, Olympic swimmers, talks about at some point, I want to say a Japanese art of swimming that I think was like samurai. Oh god, I don't remember. But it was just really fascinating, the different, almost like case studies that she uses to talk about the different ways that of why we swim, but also what we seek water for, for our mental health, for our physical health, and for food, like just so many different aspects. And it's so well written, and there's a very beautiful lyricism to the way that she writes that I think is just beautiful. Then let's talk about The Five by Hallie Rubenhold, and loads of people couldn't wait to hear my thoughts on this. So I read the first of the 5, Polly, last year during lockdown, and couldn't quite manage to go through more of this book during, the hardest time. But I kind of, saying that it was on my TBR for Nonfiction November pushed me to finish it, which I think was great, because I really did end up enjoying it. So if you don't know, this is as I said, The Untold Lives of the Women Killed by Jack the Ripper. So this is basically taking, I want to say taking the murder out of the story. So each story starts with the birth of the 5 women, and it, well, sort of, it just goes through their lives and how they came to be on the streets potentially the day that they were murdered. And it ends, I think each one of them ends with that night. A few of them have like, you know, the next day they were, the way that they were buried or something else, but it just doesn't acknowledge as much the murder, and I really appreciate that. I thought it was really funny. I think a couple months ago someone mentioned this as true crime, and I was like, I really don't see it as true crime because it doesn't talk about murder and it's not trying to solve who was Jack the Ripper, and it really does not give a crap about that actually. It cares about these women and about the historical context that they grew up in and lived in. And that's something I really, really enjoyed about this, because it's the way that she weaves in facts about the era, that we're learning about these 5 women, but we're also learning about how much did a blacksmith make in the day, and what did that compare to across other professions? What kind of work did women kind of expect to get when, you know, when they got married, or, you know, after they went to some sort of school or kind of education kids got back in the day, how workhouses, you know, worked, yeah, all that kind of stuff that I thought was a great portrait into this era. So it's just almost like a larger look at the society that created the context, obviously, that these women ended up in. And many of them end up being in these positions because of sometimes pressure of the time. You know, women weren't really allowed to be outside of the home sphere, so if they weren't married, they were suddenly discarded. So I thought that that was just a beautiful portrait of the era, of women's condition back in the day, and also gave a voice to these 5 women. I didn't really know anything about these murders. I didn't know there were 5, didn't know how he murdered them, like I didn't know anything. It's just this, I think the name of it is just in our collective consciousness, so it's really interesting to kind of learn a bit more about the background to it, without putting the men at the forefront. What I did think was like slightly sad is that every time I was reading, I kept almost expecting like a different ending. And I don't know if people who read these true crimes or like these series of historical events sometimes feel like this, where you're like, oh no, don't make that decision, don't go left on that street, don't do this, because I don't want you to end up the way that this story is supposed to end. So I kept hoping it would end differently, and obviously it doesn't. And also I think it's because I don't read that much like historical nonfiction, so I think I'm not super used to that yet. But yeah, generally I think this was an amazing read. I highly recommend it for, I think, for everyone. Then I read How to Do Nothing, Resisting the Attention Economy by Jenny Odell. This book was really interesting. It really wasn't what I expected at all. I guess I expected almost like a self-help book or something like more of that nature, you know, like was it the Happiness Project or whatever that was published like 10-15 years ago, like something of that vein, but about, I guess, disconnecting, or, you know, about doing nothing, about our attention. But it ended up being so much more. It the different sections, one of the sections was very much so about almost like philosophical interpretation of doing nothing, and of work and all of that. She talks about art a lot. That connected with me a little bit less, just because I'm not as involved in that kind of world. It's a difficult one to summarize, but generally I think one of the big conclusions and one of the things that I took out from it that I loved the most was how our idea of doing nothing is, like, when we decide to go on remote retreats and stuff like that, is that we're cutting off from the real world, and we need to kind of learn to do these things while being present in the world. I feel like the subtitle actually says a lot more about this book, like Resisting the Attention Economy, because it's not about doing nothing, it's about doing something, you know, living in our society, our lived experience now, but by trying to potentially balance all of these extra things that are always vying for our attention in our extremely interconnected and visual and kind of very what's the word I'm looking for, like sensorial, I guess, world. Yeah, so yeah, I feel like I've explained this really badly and I'm just rambling on now, but generally I enjoyed it. And would I recommend it? I think yes, if you're in for something that's a little bit philosophical about life, but I feel like some nonfiction can be a bit more superficial and kind of easier to approach, and this one does go a bit more in depth, so just, I guess, a warning. Then I read this very short essay. It's called The End, Surviving the World Through Imagined Disaster by Katie Go. And this is part of a series by 404 Inc., which is a local publisher in Edinburgh. And this year they did a series where there was 8 of these small kind of timely discussions, and I ended up participating in the Kickstarter or whatever they were doing. And so I have 2 more as well. So I did early this year read Love That Journey for Me, The Queer Revolution of Schitt's Creek by Emily Garside. I also meant to read, it arrived in November, Blind Spot, Exploring and Educating on Blindness by Maud Rowell. I'll be reading it hopefully this month, because these small books actually are so quick to read, obviously, because they're less than 100 pages, I think. Yeah, about 80 pages. So, you know, almost one sitting and you're done. And it's just so great. I picked like the 4 topics that interest me. The 4th one should be arriving soon, I think. I forget what it's about. Anyway, I'll talk about it at some point when I receive it. But this book, I guess, explore fictional apocalypse and crises. And what does it say here? It says, yeah, that explores social injustice through fantasy, sci-fi, and religious imaginary. And what can we learn from it? And this is something I know I really enjoy, apocalypse like narratives in movies, especially. Books sometimes a bit less, but this is a great look at the way that, like, what they represent in our current world and why we enjoy watching them. And yeah, it's just a lovely read. I really recommend it, although I'm not sure if they ship internationally, but worth checking the site of 404 Inc. They publish some really, really great stuff. So yeah, I'm doing free advertising. I'm not being like paid or anything, but yeah, they do some good stuff. And because this is like a local business, I think it's always worth like recommending and encouraging. Yeah. Then I read A Race Like No Other, 26.2 miles through the streets of New York by Liz Robbins. So I picked this up because I just love to read stuff about running, basically, since I'm a runner. And I didn't quite realize that this was actually about a specific marathon. So this is about the 2007 New York Marathon. And it takes like a wider look at it and also a very specific look at it. I feel like there's 26 chapters, or maybe like 27, 28 because of the 0.2 mile at the end there. But yeah, so every mile basically is a chapter talking about like the start of a race at the first kilometer, the first mile. Then it talks about each borough that this marathon goes through and the history of it and how the communities have reacted. I especially love the human stories. So some of the stories are about specific runners who ran that marathon, whether it was after an illness or they were trying to accomplish something or raise money, or actually they talked a little bit about some professional runners who ended up winning the race. So that was also interesting, although less relatable. And I really like that she added actually some volunteers as well. So the people who are literally, you know, for hours there on the side of the road filling glasses of water. And some of them have been doing it in New York City for decades. Same with the directors of the race. And it also mentioned a little bit the history of the race. And I just thought it was so good. I think people who enjoy running and have run races will enjoy this. Finally, I read The Dragons, the Giant and the Woman, a memoir by Wayétu. I learned about this book this summer when I was watching a video with Moore and another writer that I don't remember the name of right now, about their memoirs. And I heard about this one and also about her fiction book called She Who Would Be King. I think I have access to both, but I ended up picking up the audiobook to The Dragons, the Giant, and the Woman. And I thought it was really... So I had mixed thoughts because I thought it was really beautifully written. Even like the way it was being spoken, it was just, you can tell there was some really, really beautiful writing in there. The way it was basically built was a bit weird. So it goes back in time and it uses different... So it's in her own voice for most of it. A huge section of it is in her mum's kind of point of view, which I thought was one of my favorite parts actually. But yeah, the way it was constructed was a bit weird, and I've read some comments about people didn't really love it, and I have to agree. But I still think the essence of it was really, really beautiful. So it talks about how when the Civil War started in Liberia and she was living there with her dad, her mom was studying abroad in America, and they ended up obviously leaving and, you know, struggling to leave and then moving to America and growing up. I want to say it was like in Texas or something. Yeah, being confronted with racism and a lot of things that she ended up touching on, which were, I think, so important for the immigrant story, but also obviously the marginalized communities, or like Black people and people of color experiences in North America, or this especially in the US. So I thought that was really interesting. From the second half, she talks about wanting to go back to Liberia, and I thought that that's how it's going to end, but then she ends up going back and talking about how her mom ended up finding them, because her mom was in the US when the Civil War started and she didn't know if they got out or what happened. She just went out to search for them, and she sounds like an amazingly brave woman, and she just went all out for her family. And I don't know why it sort of ended with that rather than with her wanting to go back to Liberia, but it was, yeah, still genuinely, as I said, the essence of it was really, really beautiful, well done. I feel like I definitely learned a little bit about Liberia because I didn't really know that much about it, I have to say. So yeah, just great. Wayétu More, I think, is a great voice, and I actually really look forward to reading She Who Would Be King, her novel. I think it's also based in Liberia, so I think it's gonna be great, and I will report back when I've read it. Oh, I actually wanted to mention that I did start reading 2 books. I didn't finish them, but I'm working on it in this December. So the first one is Sister Outsider by Audre Lorde. Like I said, I was about halfway there. I think I'm like 60-70% there now. But yeah, very, very good book. I'll probably be talking about this more in my December wrap up, but a very good collection of like feminist essays. The second one is actually Shadow City, A Woman Walks Kabul by Taran and Khan. I think I'm about halfway. A bit less than halfway. This is really good, but it reads really, really slowly. So because I've struggled, I have had some days where I've struggled to read. This, did not do it for me. This wasn't the page turner or easy writing that I was looking for in those days. And actually, this reminds me of a book I read this summer. And it did take me a bit longer to read that book as well, because it has very similar kind of longing, lyrical writing that's also a little bit aimless. Like, I think I've noticed a lot of these books talk a little bit about identity and belonging, and you do feel like people are a bit lost or losing themselves in the narrative because there's not like a really strong plot. But this reminded me of Two Trees Make a Forest by Jessica J. Lee, which I thought was a really beautiful read, but also felt at times a bit aimless and a bit lost. And this feels a bit the same. However, I'm learning so much about Afghanistan. It's amazing, and I love to be seeing it through her eyes. And yeah, I think the section that I enjoyed the most as of now is about I want to say it's the National Library in Kabul that she goes to visit. So I'm gonna try to finish reading it this month, but it may kind of go into January as well, just depending how quickly or not quickly I manage to read it. So these were reviews for the 7 books that I read for Nonfiction November. Let me know if you've read any of them, and if you have, like, if you agree or disagree with my reviews, some of my constructive criticism, or a little, you know, adulations. I've really enjoyed actually reading all these books, and I feel after this month of trying to focus my attention on nonfiction, the start of December has already felt a little bit like that, where I'm just like, oh, I want to read this book and that book, and there's a couple audiobooks that I have going on, including I think it's Sea People that I saw recommended on Michelle Lexi's channel, and yeah, there's just a couple extra ones that I've decided to, you know, keep going with the nonfiction vibe, and it's just so fun, and I think it adds something, you know, to your knowledge and to your reading. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. I think it was a really good kick of nonfiction. Let me know how your nonfiction November went. What was your favorite read? I think mine was The Five. I'm gonna say it was The Five, definitely. I'm very glad that I kind of pushed myself to finish it. So yes, thank you so much for watching, and thank you for all the people who've subscribed lately, and hey, see you back.